Today we're going to learn about Harriet Tubman, a very good American hero.
Harriet Tubman was a woman who was enslaved around here in the 1820s to the 1840s, but she refused to accept it. So what she did was she ended up running the freedom, but she wasn't happy with just being free. She actually came back here 11 times and saved about 70 more people from slavery.
Harriet was born near here in the Thompson Farm.
No existing slave quarters can be found on the farm, and it's private property beyond the road, so we're not going to go any closer. The Thompson Farm was 2,200 acres, and much of the money that he made was actually made through timber, through wood. In fact, that's what Harriet's father did.
She didn't live here for long. Let's see where she moved to. She moved here to the Brodens farm.
Because it was a small farm, Edward Brodus would often hire out his slaves for a certain amount of money. And he would do that with Harriet quite often. So she didn't live here for too long before she ended up having to work in a neighbor's farm. One of the most important moments in Harriet's early life was when she was 13 years old. She was sent by the slave owner to come here to buy some things at the general store at Bucktown. She oversaw somebody chasing a slave, trying to subdue him, and in the middle of it, the guy threw a weight, a 2-pound weight that looked probably something kind of like this, accidentally hit Harriet, which ended up cracking her skull and almost killing her.
How did Harriet survive?
I don't know, buddy. For 2 days, she was basically left bleeding and bruised and stuff, yet somehow she was able to live. She, for the rest of her life, had some serious headaches and had dreams that she thought came from God, ones that actually inspired her to become free. And it all happened right here, on the other side of that door.
After she got better, she worked here in Madison.
Harriet learned important outdoor survival skills while working with her father in the woods near Madison, Maryland, such as how to navigate by the stars and finding food and fresh water.
She would use those skills to make her and other people free.
This is Parsons Creek, also known as Stewart's Canal, which was created and dug in by a lot of slaves back in the 1800s. What they did was they created this so that they could move the timber from Mr. Thompson's farm and from Mr. Stewart's farm out to the Chesapeake so they could sell it.
When she got married, she was near this church with John Tubman.
John Tubman was not a slave. He was a free man. But because Harriet was a slave, it meant that their children would be slaves. Their family could be broken up at any time.
That's sad.
That's really sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this wall behind you, Professor, is Harriet Tubman's actual freedom story. If you look at it, she was singing her goodbye song for people to know that she was leaving, all right, the people that she knew and loved, the other slaves. And as she did that, she saw Dr. Thompson, who she was working for in Poplar Neck. From there, she went to her first safe house, which was the home of a Quaker woman. That night, her husband told Tubman to hide in his wagon. He covered her and took her secretly to the next safe house. She also traveled without help. She had to forage for food and all kinds of things. And she describes, after the long trip, her arrival in a free state as heaven. But her freedom in Philadelphia was fragile because she was a fugitive from justice. She worked as a cook and blended into the free black community. She met William Still, the famous Underground Railroad agent, who helped her with his rescue missions. But even then, she felt the need to save other people. So, as we mentioned, or going to mention, depending on how editing goes, Harriet Tubman ran for freedom first here at Poplar Neck. We're on Poplar Neck Road. We have no way of knowing for sure exactly where it is that she actually left from. We do know that she left from the Thompson Farm, and that she was singing songs as she walked her way to freedom. Harriet saved her parents from Poplar Neck as well on one of her return trips. Of course, we don't know exactly where the house was, but it would have been in this general area.
Let's learn more about her at the Visitor Center.
This exhibit right here is what we saw earlier when I told you about that canal. Pretty cool, huh? This is to show you the different sizes of the home. James Webb's home, which would have been typical for in size for a free black man, was about that size. The Brodus home, who he wasn't wealthy though he did have slaves, would have been a decent size bigger, but then Mr. Thompson, where she was born, is actually much larger, and evidently it has a lizard in it. You see that? She actually had to catch muskrats when she was younger. Younger than you even. Pretty crazy, huh?
Why did she have to do that?
Oh, she was a slave, so she had to do what her master said, and her master said that she needed to catch the muskrats. This is the entrance to the Hannah and Jacob Leverton home. The Levertons were Quakers, were white Quakers who were known as probably the biggest Underground Railroad stop in all of the area. It's entirely possible that they knew Harriet. Harriet likely came right through here and stopped here at many of, if not all of her stops, though it's not confirmed. This is the Mount Pleasant Cemetery. When Harriet came back to save people and try to get them from slavery, what she would do is she would meet them in places. And one of the places that she was known to have met them was a cemetery, and it's believed that this is the one. She wouldn't get too close to the plantations because she was a very highly sought person for having saved people. So as a result, she would meet them a few miles away from their homes. In the 1800s, blacks were not allowed to meet in groups. The white folk were afraid of that. So what they would do is they would meet in secret. And a lot of times they would meet in places like cemeteries, just like here at the Mount Pleasant Cemetery. Here at the cemetery is the final resting place of James Webb. We'll be going to his home really soon. This is Webb's cabin. It would be the perfect example of what a free African American's home would look like during the time of Harriet Tubman. In fact, it's the only one that's still surviving. It's very likely that Ben and Rit, Harriet's parents, would have had a very similar house to this one. This is a really good example. And the fact that we're not that far from Poplar Neck, there's a really good chance that the Webbs and the Rosses knew one another.
I love Harriet Tubman. Harriet used the river to find the wharf.
We are at the Denton Wharf, which is site number 33 on the Underground Railroad, and we're overlooking the Choptank River, the river that Harriet Tubman would use as a guide to get her north. It was too wide for people to pass, and you didn't really want to go across the bridge if you were enslaved because that was a place where they would look for you. However, you could use this river, just as Harriet did, to find their way north. Here's stop 33, the Tuckahoe Neck Meeting House. It's the Quaker meeting house in the area, one of the first ones in the area. The Quakers, on top of trying to help people that were slaves, they were also really big into women's rights. They just really believed in equality, which is amazing. Harriet Tubman went on to become friends with many of the women in this congregation, and it inspired her to get involved in women's rights as she got older. Here we are in Greensboro, stop number 35 for the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad. In 1797, Greensboro resident Peter Harrington was president of the Choptank Abolition Society, formed to promote the end of slavery in Maryland. Supported by Quakers, some Methodists, and others, regional societies like this worked on the local level. Like Harriet Tubman, fugitives relied heavily on the secret network of safe houses belonging to blacks and whites throughout central and northern Delaware. Harriet Tubman later told historian Wilbur Siebert that her preferred route was by way of her parents' home in Poplar Neck to Sandtown across the Maryland border. In order to do that, however, she had to cross the Choptank, and this was a likely spot. And here's the Choptank River right at the border of Delaware and Maryland. It's not a part of the stop, but it's just neat to know that we are in the footsteps, walking the footsteps of this amazing woman. As the sun is setting, we are right on the border of Maryland and Delaware near Sandtown, where Harriet Tubman crossed from Maryland into Delaware. She still had troubles as Delaware was a slave state. However, there was a much larger free population of African Americans. Harriet Tubman mentioned the crossroads of Will Grove to historian Wilbur Siebert in the 1897 interview about her underground journeys. She also noted other Delaware place names and key people that the Byway also hits. Across Willow Grove Road, abolitionist Henry Cowgill housed freedom seekers at his farm, according to oral tradition. From this locale, they could have chosen to venture to Camden, where free blacks Abraham Gibbs and brothers Nathaniel and William Brinkley joined forces to carry them further north. The travelers' movements varied, but likely included pathways near and through Dover, Smyrna, Blackbird, Odessa, Newcastle, and Wilmington. We're going to conclude our trip on the Harriet Tubman Byway here in Dover as we overlook the old original State House of Delaware. It's a story of 8 people who got information from Harriet Tubman on how to get to their freedom. When they got to Dover, they came across a gentleman by the name of Thomas Otwell, who was to take them to William Brinkley, their next person that was going to help them get past Dover, Smyrna, and Blackbird. Instead, he turned them into the sheriff, took them to the courthouse and to the original jailhouse, which was right in this area. It's no longer here. Once the 8 realized that they were being taken to jail, they fought their way out of the jail using fire and a number of things, and were able to clear the wall and work their way to freedom. It's a great example of how not everybody that was saying that they're going to help you was intending to help you, and it's just an amazing story.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.